we had an athlete come in. He was an MLS athlete, and he'd had 4 surgeries at this point, maybe 5 surgeries on his ACL at this point because he had sustained an infection. So they had to go in, remove the infection. That didn't really get it cleaned up. They had to go in and remove the graft, let it heal, regraft it, the whole thing. So he was on his 4th surgery by the time I saw him. And 2 amazing things stuck out with this. I'll give you the conclusion first. The conclusion is that he went back to the MLS at about 4.5, 5 months, which is not what I would condone from a rehab standpoint to get back. And I was very clear about that at the time. I'm like, bro, I do not think this is our best method. Although I couldn't really fail him because of how well he did on everything. So it was truly incredible. But 2 things he did very early on in that process, which at the time for me, this was a little bit, what we now, probably 7 years ago. It was like 2013. Yeah, 7 years ago. He came into the clinic and he's like, hey, I'm doing 2 things. I'm doing a blood flow restriction strategy. And I'm also, this is a little bit crazy, so I don't necessarily condone this yet, but he's running on the Alter G at like day 7 post-op, right? So we'll talk about that another time. But the BFR side of this, like I said, best ACL I probably ever rehabbed in my career as far as getting back and having incredible success, being super successful at the pro level following it. And for the next several years, the team ended up winning the championship 2 years later. So really played well. But nonetheless, was this idea of BFR. And the big thing with BFR that's such an advantage for ACL is you can't really load them as heavily early on in the process. And this BFR strategy allows us to load them very, very lightly, maybe 30% load or so, very early in the process and really prevent atrophy. Mm-hmm. Aaron and I were talking earlier today about this idea of atrophy and how probably the research has been showing that that's one of the biggest battles we face is that people are inactive after the surgery, of course, for 4 weeks, 6 weeks in some cases. Heaven forbid they have a meniscus repair and they're not weight bearing for 6 weeks. They're just going to lose that whole limb. So using BFR early and often we found to be a really great tool